Get ready to hear cemetery horror stories that will make you think twice before walking among the graves at night. Like in the story you're about to hear, where a cemetery manager witnesses something impossible during a burial in the middle of a snowstorm. But before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories, and let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from. Willow Creek Cemetery always had that air of forced tranquility, like the silence there was more of an unspoken agreement than a natural state. You know how some places feel too quiet? That's how it was. I've worked there for over 10 years as the operations manager, handling schedules, maintenance, burials, and making sure visitors didn't slip on the ice or complain about the mud. Nothing glamorous, but the routine gave me a strange kind of comfort. Until the day Naomi Carter walked into my office. She moved slowly, hunched inside a thick coat, her eyes red and her voice trembling. There was something about her that stood out, not because she was odd, but because she seemed too fragile to be there alone. She stuttered a little when she spoke, like each word was fighting its way past an emotion she was trying to swallow. She was there to buy a plot for her mother, Rachel Carter. That was the name of the soon-to-be deceased. Or more accurately, the almost deceased. Rachel was still breathing, but not for long. Terminal brain cancer. I'd seen plenty of people preparing a resting place ahead of time, but the way Naomi talked about her mother, like she was still listening, it unsettled me. As if just saying her name might summon her presence into the room. It gave me a weird feeling, like a faint chill creeping up my spine. But I went through the motions like I always did. We picked a spot near a row of pine trees where the snow always settled beautifully on winter mornings. Naomi said her mother loved painting snowy landscapes, and it seemed fitting. We handled all the paperwork, and she left with the quiet certainty that when the time came, everything would be ready. And it came. Rachel's funeral happened 2 weeks later, right in the middle of a storm. I considered postponing it, but the family insisted. They said it was her wish. The wind cut through us like knives, the snow falling sideways, stinging our faces like tiny needles. Still, there they stood, a small group huddled around the casket, heads bowed, faces pale. The outdoor service was shorter than usual. It was hard to focus on the pastor's words with the howling wind drowning everything out. The burial itself had to be delayed. The backhoe couldn't reach the gravesite because of the deep snow. We decided to wait a couple of hours for reinforcements. Naomi, her father, and 2 uncles were taken to the chapel to warm up while I and the maintenance crew tried to clear a path to the plot. By the time I stopped to catch my breath, my fingers had gone numb. That's when I saw it. A figure moved between the headstones, steps light, almost floating, as if gravity didn't apply. Something was off. It wasn't just the fact that someone was wandering alone through the graves in a storm. It was the way they moved, unhurried, unaffected by the cold, as if time and weather meant nothing. And the strangest part? They seemed to be barefoot. My first thought was that it might be someone in distress, or a grieving relative lost in their grief. I shouted. No answer. The figure kept moving, disappearing behind an old mausoleum. I ran after them. Nothing. The snow around me was untouched, pristine. No footprints. No sign anyone had been there at all. I stood there for a moment trying to rationalize it, but all I felt was an overwhelming, almost physical sense of being watched. Not by someone, but by something. You know that feeling when a chill runs through you, but from the inside out? Like something just passed through you? That's what it was. In that moment, I wanted to believe it was just exhaustion, the cold, or both. I went back to the main building, still shaking. I sat in my office, pulled off my gloves, and rubbed my hands together, trying to get the blood flowing again. That's when I heard it. A sound, coming from somewhere down the hall. It was singing. A soft, drawn-out melody, almost childlike. But it wasn't any song I recognized, and the tone, it gave me the creeping sense that the voice belonged to something that shouldn't be able to make a sound at all. I stood slowly, opened my office door, and followed the sound, stepping lightly. The singing stopped abruptly. The hallway fell into total silence. except for the distant howl of the storm outside. When I turned back, I saw something that made my stomach twist. On my office window, there was a pattern in the frost that hadn't been there before. It looked like a painting made with delicate fingertips, fine, deliberate strokes. And that's exactly what it was. A painting. A winter scene. A row of snow-covered trees, just like the view from Rachel's plot. And in the corner of the image, a figure stood facing a window. My window. I just stood there staring at the frost for minutes. The temperature in the room had dropped noticeably. It was like the negative energy of something had seeped into the space. I didn't know whether to open the window, wipe it away, or pray. All I knew was that something had changed. And then I noticed a detail that still sends shivers down my spine. The style of the painting was identical to the artwork in Rachel's funeral program, the landscapes she used to paint. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm needed. I'd spent most of the night tossing and turning, trying to make sense of what had happened. That frost painting wasn't a coincidence. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself that the cold had randomly created it, a part of me already knew. It had been made by someone, or something. Before sunrise, I went straight to the cemetery. Everything was still covered in mist and the remnants of the storm. I walked to the Carter plot, where Rachel was supposed to be buried. The ground was clear, the grave dug, the casket still in storage, waiting for the right moment. But that's not what caught my attention. Right there, on the untouched layer of snow covering the grave, was a drawing. An entire scene, not made with paint or charcoal, but shaped into the snow itself, as if invisible fingers had sculpted every detail. I stood frozen, speechless. It was a landscape. The cemetery at night, bathed in moonlight. You could see the pines, the headstones, even the crooked bench near the old oak. And in the center of the scene, a small figure stood with its back turned, looking toward the administrative building, toward my window, the same window where the frost painting had appeared the night before. It was like someone, or something, had left it there for me. A message. I know you saw me. A reminder that what I'd experienced wasn't just my imagination. I went back to the main building without saying a word to anyone. For the rest of the day, I went through the motions of the burial as if nothing had happened. Naomi seemed strangely at peace, like she'd already accepted everything. She held a small notebook. Later, I found out it was her mother's journal, and spent the whole time staring at the ground, as if expecting something to emerge at any moment. After the service, when everyone had left, I stayed behind for a few more hours. I refused to leave before checking my office window one last time. The frost had melted, of course, but the glass still held a faint, almost imperceptible outline of the painted figure, like a shadow, a lingering memory. That night I dreamed of her. Rachel stood in the middle of the cemetery, wearing the same hospital gown, her bare feet sinking into the snow, her eyes completely white. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me, but I felt it. Felt that she wanted to show me something, to make me understand she wasn't just some lost spirit wandering between worlds. She was aware. She knew where she was. And the scariest part? She knew where I was too. I woke up to the sound of something tapping against the glass. Trembling, I got up and went to the window. It was just a branch, pushed by the wind. But for a second, I saw something move between the headstones, a silhouette that vanished too quickly to identify. Since that day, I've never seen anything as clearly as I did that week. But the feeling never left. Sometimes I'll feel a sudden cold near the window, or I'll hear footsteps in the snow when I know there's no one out there. The energy from that experience never fully faded. I've never told this story to anyone, not my wife, not my co-workers. They wouldn't understand. Or worse, they'd think I'd lost it. And maybe I have, a little. But every time I pass Rachel Carter's grave and notice how the snow there always looks whiter, smoother almost, tended compared to the other plots I remember. There are things we'll never be able to explain, and sometimes it's better to leave it that way. Because when the other side decides to reach out, it's not always looking for an answer. Sometimes it just wants to be seen and remembered, like a delicate trace in the snow or a silent presence outside your window. Creepy, right? What did you think of that story? On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate it? Drop your thoughts down below. Stories like this remind us that not even the snow can cover up the presence of the dead. And what you're about to see next proves that sometimes, if you're walking through a cemetery alone, you might end up crossing paths with something that shouldn't be there, like the mysterious girl at the gate. Some people run with loud music blasting in their ears, not me. I prefer the silence, especially at night. It's like my thoughts fall into place better that way. But that particular night, the silence felt different, heavy, wrong. It was early November, the air already sharp with cold, and the university campus nearly empty because of the long holiday weekend. I had the brilliant idea to run all the way to Blackwood Cemetery, about 1.5 miles from where I was. The place was massive, full of ancient trees, and right next to it stood the ruins of an abandoned asylum the city had never bothered to tear down. Most people avoided that area after dark, but to me it was just another quiet route. No traffic, no noise, and let's be honest, no one around to judge me for looking like a lunatic jogging at 11 at night. I only took my phone, stuffed in my jacket pocket. No earbuds, no playlist, nothing. The plan was simple: run for 15 minutes, then head back. But when I reached the cemetery's main gate, rusted iron bars, a faded sign, I got this weird feeling. Nothing specific, just the unsettling sense that I was being watched. I shrugged it off, told myself it was just paranoia, and kept jogging along the sidewalk like always. That's when I saw the figure sitting there. A kid, a little boy. He was perched on the steps of the cemetery entrance, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a thin t-shirt, sweatpants, and no shoes. His face was half hidden under his bangs, and he looked lost or scared. I stopped dead in my tracks. "Hey, you okay?" I asked, slowing my approach. He lifted his head and stared at me. His eyes were wide, like he'd just seen something terrible. His skin was pale, his lips chapped. My first thought, where the hell are this kid's parents? I crouched down, trying to look less threatening. "You alone? Want me to call the police or your dad?" His reaction was instant. He shook his head hard and scooted back, like my question had offended him. His expression flipped from fear to anger in a second. "They won't help," he snapped, his voice cracking. "No one helps." I didn't know what to say. Before I could react, he jumped up and bolted through the gate, weaving between the headstones like he knew the place by heart. I ran after him without thinking, calling out. A thick mist was rolling in, clinging to the ground, and the old lampposts barely lit the paths between the graves. The trees cast shifting shadows, and with every step I took, the air felt heavier, colder, like something unseen was right behind me. I called for the boy again, but there was no answer. I scanned the area, searching for any movement. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. I stopped near an old angel statue, the kind with cracked wings. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't just from the run. It was fear. Real, heavy fear. The kind that sticks to your skin like static. That's when I heard a snap to my right. I whipped around, but there was no one there, just rows of graves, headstones covered in moss and wilted flowers. I took a step back. The ground was littered with dry leaves, but the sound I heard wasn't footsteps. It was more like scratching, like something was dragging itself along, just out of sight. A chill ran up my spine, a presence. I can't explain it, but it felt like someone was standing right behind me, watching in silence. No voice, no breathing, just there. And it wasn't in my head. I spun around and started walking fast back toward the gate, but the path seemed longer than before. Every shadow stretched too far, every sound too loud. It was like the cemetery had changed the moment I stepped inside. I fumbled for my phone, trying to call someone, anyone, but the screen was black, frozen. When it finally rebooted, it still read 11:07 p.m., the same time it had shown when I left campus, like time had stopped in there. I broke into a run, panic clawing at my chest. The branches of the trees seemed to move on their own, even though there was no wind. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a small figure darting between the graves, child-sized. Too fast to be real. By the time I reached the gate, it was shut, completely. The iron bars that had been slightly ajar were now locked tight. Did I close it behind me? I hadn't even touched it. But there it was, sealed shut, like something, or someone, didn't want me leaving. I didn't hesitate. I climbed over the gate, scraping my arms and legs in the process. I hit the ground hard on the other side, my knee throbbing, my hands dirty with rust and soil. But I didn't look back. I ran until I reached the first street lamp, only stopping when I was standing under its glow. I stood there for minutes, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. The energy of that place still clung to me, like a part of it had followed me out. I didn't sleep that night. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Exhaustion, the dark, adrenaline. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That boy, his scream, the feeling of being watched, my phone stuck in time. It all replayed in my mind on loop. I didn't tell anyone. Not my roommates, not my girlfriend. I kept it to myself, pretending everything was normal. But something inside me had shifted. Like a piece of that night had latched onto me and refused to let go. A constant weight, a shadow clinging to my back. 3 days later, curiosity, or maybe fear disguised as curiosity, got the better of me. I dug into the university library's archives, sifting through old newspapers and dusty records. That's when I found it. The cemetery was over 150 years old, and the asylum next door had shut down in the 70s after reports of abuse and patients disappearing. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd find with a quick Google search. I had to dig through yellowed papers and microfilm. And then I saw it, a 1972 article that made my blood run cold. Child vanishes after fleeing asylum in the early hours. Witnesses report seeing a boy running toward the cemetery. His name was Gabriel, 7 years old, never found. On the same page there was a note. Since that night, locals had reported seeing a boy wandering among the graves after dark. Some claimed to hear screams. Others said they'd seen him sitting by the gate like he was waiting for someone. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen a lost kid that night. I'd seen him. I closed the newspaper, put everything back, and left the library without looking behind me. I wanted to bury it all. Forget it ever happened. I never went back to that cemetery, not even in daylight. I changed my running route, sticking to busy streets, broad daylight. Never alone, never at night. But sometimes when I'm near that part of town, even from a distance, I feel that same chill creep up my neck, that same pressure in my chest, like something unseen is still watching me. I don't know if that boy wanted help, or if he just wanted to be seen, remembered, or maybe he's trapped there, reliving his escape for eternity, running between the graves like he still thinks he can get away. All I know is that it was real. The only supernatural thing I've ever experienced. And honestly, I hope it stays that way. Because after that night, I learned that not all silence is empty. Sometimes what seems peaceful is just waiting for you to step inside so it can keep you. So bizarre. After an encounter like that, it's hard to believe ghosts don't exist. But the next story goes even deeper, because it's not about a stranger. It's about someone who should have been dead for years. If I'd known what that day would mean for me, I might have thought twice before stepping into that cemetery. But when you have a deep connection with someone, especially someone who's already gone, sometimes you ignore the signs. It was my grandma's birthday that led me there. She'd been gone for 3 years, but I felt like I had to go. It wasn't an obligation. It was more like a calling. The bond I had with her was different. She was my safe harbor, you know, the kind of person who listens to everything, understands everything, and makes coffee at all the wrong hours just to make you feel at home. And after she passed, the world felt quieter. On her birthday, I decided to visit the cemetery where she was buried, alone. The weather wasn't on my side. The sky was gray, heavy, that fine mist that doesn't soak you but clings to you, uncomfortable, like it's trying to push you back home. I took the car early with flowers on the passenger seat. The road to the cemetery was long, winding, lined with dry trees, all trembling in the wind. And with every mile, a bad feeling grew inside me. It wasn't sadness. It was something else. A weight on my chest, like someone had been watching me even before I left the house. As I got closer to the cemetery, it only got worse. The trees seemed to lean in, like they were trying to hide what lay ahead. When I parked, there wasn't another car in sight. No staff, no visitors, just an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of leaves scraping across the ground. The cemetery gate creaked as I pushed it open, the kind of sound that sends chills down your spine without needing to be loud. I walked slowly to her grave, stepping around puddles and trying not to sink into the soft earth. The ground was wetter than it should have been, and there was a thick, low fog, hiding the names on the smaller headstones. When I reached her grave, I placed the flowers down, adjusted them as best I could, and sat on a stone bench beside it. I stayed quiet, and in that quiet, I started to notice. The temperature had dropped suddenly. The wind stopped. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps anymore, and that's when I saw it. Between two rows of graves, a good distance ahead of me, stood a figure. Dark coat, wide-brimmed hat. For a second, I thought it was just a cemetery worker, but when I looked closer, my heart froze. It was my grandpa, the same wool coat he wore in the winters, the same hat. But he'd been dead for 5 years. I stood up abruptly, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but he was still there, standing, staring. Or at least it felt like he was. His face was too shadowed to tell. I took 2 steps forward, nearly tripped over a grave, but when I looked up again, he was gone. I spun around, looked behind me. Nothing, just the fog spreading. And then came that unbearable feeling, the sense of being watched. It wasn't just discomfort. It was like someone was breathing down my neck, like some presence was clinging to me, following me. I hurried back to the car, my clothes damp and my hands shaking. I locked the doors the second I got inside and took a deep breath. But even with the engine running and the radio crackling softly, the feeling didn't go away. I drove back, trying to pretend nothing had happened, but at the first wide curve, where the forest pulls back from the road, I saw him again. My grandpa, standing at the edge of the road, same coat, same hat. But this time his back was turned. I nearly swerved off the road. I hit the brakes without thinking. The car skidded, and I only avoided flipping because luck, or something else, kept the front wheel grounded at the last second. I pulled over, my heart pounding in my throat. I didn't get out. I didn't even think about it. I just locked the doors again, took a deep breath and drove away, the car trembling. Every tree I passed seemed to hide something. The rearview mirror made me nervous, like I was afraid to see someone in the back seat. When I got home, I ran inside, locked everything, doors, windows, even the back gate. I turned on all the lights, blasted the TV, and went straight for a hot shower. But not even the water washed away that feeling. It was like something had come back with me, some dark energy, some presence that wouldn't let go. That's when the phone rang. The first time I thought it was just a wrong number, but when I answered, the voice on the other end was my grandpa's, but distorted, slow, deep. It said my name, once, twice, 3 times, like it was calling me from far away. I hung up immediately, the phone rang again, and I let it. Something was wrong. This wasn't possible. It wasn't normal. It was like that supernatural experience was stretching into my space, my home, my refuge. I sat on the couch all night, lights on, eyes on the phone. Every time it rang, it was the same thing. The distorted voice, calling my name. Not yelling, not threatening, just calling. The next morning, the phone stayed silent. But I kept hearing that voice in my head for days. Since then, I've never gone back to that cemetery. Not on her birthday, not ever. I even avoid driving past it. And every time the phone rings after 10 at night, my whole body freezes. I don't know what happened that day. But I know what I felt. And I know there are things we don't understand, but they stay with us. The experience left its mark. not just emotionally. Sometimes I wake up to the smell of damp earth in my room. Sometimes I see the reflection of someone standing behind me in the living room window. And sometimes, just every now and then, the phone rings, and I let it ring. Terrifying, isn't it? When the supernatural touches your own family, the fear feels way too close. But sometimes the unexplainable doesn't just appear to one person. It shows up in front of several witnesses at once, like in the strange nighttime walk you're about to hear now. But before we go on, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying these stories. So hit that like button to let YouTube know you want more content like this, and never miss another horror story. The moment the guide turned on his lantern and pointed it toward the rusted gate, I felt the air shift. It wasn't just the wind. It was like time itself had thickened in that spot, as if the sounds of the city had stopped just outside the cemetery walls. And even though I was in a group of over 20 people, I felt it. The creeping sensation of being watched. Not by anyone in the group, but by something that hadn't been invited. Savannah is famous for being one of the most haunted cities in America. I'd heard it 100 times, but I brushed it off as tourist hype. I went into this trip skeptical, figuring I'd laugh more than I'd jump. But when the guide started telling stories about soldiers buried there, about epidemics that wiped out entire neighborhoods, about bodies hastily buried during storms, something inside me started to change. It wasn't just history. It felt alive. The gravel path led us deeper into the cemetery, toward the oldest graves. Twisted, moss-covered trees formed a natural tunnel, swallowing what little light was left of the evening. And that's when it happened. I'd lagged behind the group a little, walking slower, studying the weathered headstones. I tried to take a picture, but my phone camera just froze. The screen went black for a second, then came back on like nothing had happened. When I looked up, I saw something moving between two of the larger headstones about 15 feet away. At first, I thought it was someone from the group cutting through the graves. But then I realized there were only legs walking. A pair of legs in old, heavy fabric pants, like something from a soldier's uniform. The steps were steady, purposeful, like the figure knew exactly where it was going. But there was no torso, no head, just legs. Nothing above the waist, no shadow, no shape. It was as if someone had sliced the top half off and left the rest to walk on its own. I froze. I couldn't call out. I couldn't even hit record. I just stood there, phone in hand, my chest locked up. The legs crossed the path slowly, disappeared behind a mausoleum, and vanished, like they'd never been there at all. No footsteps, no rustling, just that heavy, suffocating silence. The group kept moving. No one else seemed to notice. No one said a word. And me? I was shaking on the inside. You'd think someone would scream, or at least say something after seeing that. But it was like the world had paused just for me in that moment. I spent the rest of the night pretending everything was normal. I laughed at the guide's jokes, acted like the other stories were getting to me. But the truth was, nothing else felt funny. My mind was stuck on those legs, on something that made no sense. By the time we got back to the starting point, I was covered in cold sweat, even in the cool night air. Back at the hotel, I went straight to Google. I searched forums, Facebook groups, old videos, and to my shock, I found a post from 2003. A woman claimed she'd seen the same thing in that same cemetery. A pair of legs in thick, old-fashioned pants, marching alone between the graves. The post had barely any comments, most of them mocking. But it sent chills down my spine. I'd seen the exact same thing, 20 years later. The next day, I went back alone in broad daylight. The place looked ordinary. Visitors strolling, taking pictures, reading historical markers. I stood near the spot where I'd seen the legs, trying to make sense of it. But in the daylight, it was just a beautiful, historic cemetery. No dark energy, no lingering presence, just me and the gnawing doubt in my head. When I got home, I tried telling a few friends what I'd seen. Most of them thought I was joking. One or two tried to humor me, but I could tell they didn't really believe it. And honestly, I wouldn't have either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't my imagination. I saw it. I know what I saw. I spent months searching for explanations. I considered projections, holograms, hallucinations, even sleepwalking. But nothing fit. There was no way it was part of the tour. No way it was some marketing stunt. It was something old, something that had just stepped through for a few seconds, then slipped back to wherever it came from, like it had escaped through a tear in reality. I've never had an experience like it since. I've visited other haunted places, gone on 2 more ghost tours in different cities, but nothing compared to that night in Savannah. And you want to know the truth? After that, I never had the nerve to do another cemetery tour. It wasn't just a scare, it was a turning point. It forced me to see the world differently. Now, when someone tells me they felt a strange presence or had a bizarre dream in an old place, I listen. I don't dismiss it, because I know what we see with our eyes isn't always all there is. Sometimes what's hidden is the most important part. Every now and then when I'm alone late at night, I think about that moment. Those legs walking like they were bound to a destination they never reached. I wonder who that man was, if he died in battle, or from sickness, or abandoned. And the strangest part? It feels like he knew I was there, like he walked just so I could see him, like he'd been waiting all those years to show himself to someone who would remember. And I do remember. Every detail. No matter how much time passes, it's burned into me like an invisible scar. Sometimes it itches, sometimes it stings, but it never fades. Maybe one day I'll go back to Savannah. Not for another tour, just to stand there in silence, facing the same path where it all happened. Who knows? Maybe something will decide to show itself again. Spooky. What did you think of that story? On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate it? Share your opinion in the comments. The plan was simple. Have some fun, break the routine, do something different. The night was warm, everyone was hyped, laughing for no reason. We always hung out after work, but that Friday the conversation turned to urban legends, spooky stories to freak each other out. That's when Vinny brought up St. Elmo's cemetery. He said his uncle told him the place was cursed, that no one got buried there anymore, and the few old-timers in town even avoided walking past it. They claimed to hear voices, crying, even footsteps in the dead of night. The kind of story you laugh at in the moment, but lingers when you're alone in the dark. Lucas, the most fired up of us all, threw down the challenge. Let's go tonight, just to check it out. Walk in, walk around, walk out. Anyone who runs is a coward. And just like that, it was settled. 5 grown men, all in our late 20s, playing tough and sneaking into an abandoned cemetery. We went in the back way, of course. The main gate was chained shut, covered in private property signs. We circled around, climbed a grassy slope, and squeezed through a gap in the back wall. The second my feet hit that damp, leaf-covered ground, I felt the air change. The breeze turned cold, unnaturally cold, like the temperature dropped 10 degrees the moment we stepped inside. And the silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. It was clear the place had been abandoned for years. The graves were covered in moss, many cracked or sinking into the earth. Crooked crosses, some knocked to the ground. There was a weight in the air, like we'd interrupted something. No one talked much. Lucas tried to joke around, but his voice came out low, strained. Even he felt it. We all split up to explore. Vinny and Rafa headed right, between mausoleums covered in ivy. Lucas stayed near a massive headstone with an angel statue, snapping pictures. I decided to check out the oldest section, where the graves were just half-buried stones, nameless and forgotten. I walked slowly, phone in hand, recording a video to joke about later. But the joke died when I heard a noise on the other side of a rusted fence. It sounded like bare feet stepping on dirt. I moved closer, thinking it was one of the guys trying to mess with me. That's when I saw her. On the other side of the fence, between 2 overgrown graves, stood a woman. She was facing away from me. Long, tattered white dress, dark hair almost down to her waist. I couldn't see her face. She didn't move. just stood there like she was waiting for something. My heart stopped. I froze. I tried to call out, but my voice wouldn't come. My fingers shook, but I kept recording. I took a step back, and that's when she turned. I can't explain what I saw. Her face was pale, almost colorless. Her skin looked like wet paper. But the worst part? Her eyes, or the lack of them, just hollow, dark pits. And yet I knew she was looking at me. A feeling of being watched consumed me, like something was staring straight through me, past skin and bone. I ran. No thought, no looking back. I heard footsteps behind me, but they weren't running. They were slow, dragging, like she had all the time in the world. I screamed for my friends, but my voice barely carried. The cemetery felt bigger, denser. The trees swayed in a wind that didn't exist outside those walls. I found Vinny first. He saw me panting, desperate, and thought I was messing around. He only believed me when I showed him the video. We ran to find the others. We all gathered by the wall where we'd come in. No one wanted to believe it, but the video was there. Shaky and dark, but you could see her standing there. And at the end, just before I ran, she took a step. One step. But it was enough to turn us all pale. We climbed back over the wall, jumped into our cars, and drove away in silence. The adrenaline faded into a cold, creeping dread no one wanted to acknowledge. On the way back, Rafa said he felt like someone was behind him the whole time. Lucas swore he saw a shadow moving between the graves. And Vinny? He deleted the video from his phone, said he didn't want that thing with him anymore. In the days that followed, no one brought it up. But I felt it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, or the lack of one. Some nights I'd wake up sweating, hearing footsteps in the hallway, even though I lived alone. The bathroom mirror would fog up on its own sometimes. A lingering negative energy hung over me, like something had followed me home. I even tried going back a week later, in daylight. I went alone, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. The gate was still chained, but just looking in made me nauseous, dizzy. I turned around and left, vowing never to set foot in that place again. Now, even months later, I still avoid that street. I won't even drive past it. St. Elmo's Cemetery became a blind spot on my mental map of the city. Every time someone mentions ghosts or haunted places, my mind flashes back to that night, to that face, to the sound of those footsteps. Sometimes I wonder if it was real, or if our minds played a collective trick on us. But it doesn't matter. The experience stayed with me. It left marks, not just in my memories, but in how I see the world now. Some things just can't be explained, and some places shouldn't be disturbed, not out of curiosity, not as a joke. What happened in that cemetery changed me. It showed me that real fear isn't just a jump scare. It's the kind that stays with you, quiet, waiting for the right moment to surface again. So tell me, after that last story, would you dare step into a cemetery alone at night? If you've stayed with me all the way to the end, drop the phrase "haunted graveyard" in the comments so I'll know you're one of the brave ones. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and leave a like to support the channel. After all, we've been through some chilling moments together tonight. And hey, there's a video right here that keeps the same dark vibe. Click it and come with me, because the night is just getting started.